Hello world! This is Mr. Gerald speaking to you on my first installment of my audio series, Another Point of View, a series in which I mostly just speak about a variety of topics, some with the intention of being informative, others mostly my opinion, but most are a mix of both. I've never really done an audio recording of myself for the purpose of posting it online before, so this process is completely new to me, which is part of the reason why I'm doing this. It's my New Year's resolution, to do one of these every week and post them online on Sunday. And while it's rather expected for folks to stop committing to their resolution not long after making them into the new year, I'm actually hoping to keep this one. And so then, let's jump into my first segment called Happening Now. Sort of. Now, I know it's a new year, 2015 and whatnot, but I want to talk about something that was a big bit of news for much of last year, and has been in the headlines for a few years now, that being Syria's civil war. The conflict has changed quite a bit in the past year. Originally, before the civil war began, in early 2011, it was just people protesting within the context of the Arab Spring movement in Syria against Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's government. Assad's government apparently had no interest in tolerating the protests and decided to respond with violent crackdowns. So the protests transitioned slowly into a full-out armed rebellion. Since then, there have been various groups or factions that have formed or joined into the conflict, and there has actually been a lot of foreign intervention occurring or being considered. The conflict has seen several deaths occur, and the United Nations estimates about 200,000 dead, and millions of Syrians have either been displaced or fled the country since the conflict began. Right now on the screen I have a map of Syria giving you an idea of what the current situation looks like. The red is pro-Assad territory, the gray is controlled by the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, better known as ISIS. The green areas are anti-Assad forces, this includes the Free Syrian Army, and the dark yellowish areas are controlled primarily by Kurdish forces. In a nutshell, the Kurds are mostly fighting against Assad and ISIS forces, with ISIS seemingly taking priority. The Kurds are hoping to establish themselves with a degree of autonomy within a post-Assad Syria. Assad's forces are basically fighting everyone else to some degree. Assad has had some support from Lebanon and Iran in the form of soldiers and supplies, which have assisted in making up for casualties and losses in his Syrian government's army. He also has support from Russia and its President Vladimir Putin. Russia has actually prevented in the past attempts at foreign intervention to force Assad to step down as president through the UN Council veto. ISIS is also essentially fighting all the other factions, though supposedly some anti-Assad forces have signed a non-aggression pact with ISIS. And last but not least, the other anti-Assad forces that don't fall under the category of ISIS or the Kurds are primarily engaging against Assad's forces, though some are also actively fighting against ISIS. Of all the forces, the anti-Assad forces, mainly the Free Syrian Army, enjoy the support of the United States of America and some of its allied NATO members. However, as the map kind of illustrates, they are the least concentrated and centralized force in the conflict. Some anti-Assad forces have actually defected to side with ISIS. Ultimately, though, the U.S. seems to have two apparent goals in regards to their policy in Syria, which they've made quite clear through their words and actions. And those are to remove Assad from power, or at least get him to step down, and to counteract the spread of ISIS. Just to provide my overall opinion based on what I know and have heard about the conflict, strategically speaking on the ground, ISIS seems to be the strongest faction. Fortunately, they also seem to be the most hated faction and are surrounded by enemies on various fronts. They also don't have any presence in the skies, which leaves them prone to airstrikes by both Assad and U.S. allied forces. Top priority for Assad and the Kurds should be to eliminate ISIS's presence in Syria. At this point, if Assad wants to retain control, I feel he has to make concessions with the Kurds and perhaps even come to an agreement to formally ally with them against ISIS. The Kurds are the only faction with a somewhat moderate stance towards Assad. They share a common enemy in ISIS, and they could use a friend. Once ISIS is defeated, Assad could focus solely on dealing with the rest of the less unified anti-Assad forces. Alternatively, if I had to offer up a strategy to the anti-Assad forces with non-extremist elements, despite what I perceive to be a bleak situation, I would suggest that they try to establish a formal agreement with the Kurds to work together against ISIS, defend their positions in southern Syria in the hopes that Assad expends his energy in dealing with ISIS to the east, while at the same time working aggressively and opportunistically in the north, where they seem to have more territory and resources at their disposal to gain ground. The focus of the offensive should be against Assad's forces, though, because strategically I don't think it makes sense for them to engage against ISIS until they deal with Assad's forces, which are bombing them from the skies. And to ISIS I offer no strategic advice and say that I hope they are soundly defeated and swiftly for the various atrocities they have committed. Obviously, within the confines of this recording, I can only talk about this so much. If you'd like to learn more about the current conflict in Syria, I encourage you to check out the links below in the description. Moving on from worldly events, I want to address the internet community itself in a segment I like to call Let's Talk Internet. The internet has a lot of positives to it. You can use it for fact-finding, reading up about current events, watching and listening to YouTube videos for entertainment, and so on. But it's also got quite a few negatives, a lot of which are caused just by some users on the internet itself, ruining the experience for others. One in particular that I want to talk about is game raging. Now, just to tell you a little more about myself, one of my hobbies is playing video games. And gaming for me when I was growing up as a kid was more of a single-player experience. Multiplayer just didn't appeal to me. For starters, I've got a competitive personality, and as a kid I hated to lose, which isn't a good combination when you're not particularly amazing at the game. So competitive multiplayer wasn't something I liked. But as I grew up, multiplayer became a bigger deal, with faster internet speeds becoming available to the general public. Online gaming picked up. Even better, I eased up on my overly competitive nature and found that I could tolerate losing. The familiar phrase, "it's just a game," comes to mind as the best way to explain why I got better at tolerating losing. So I opened up to multiplayer experiences and really found myself enjoying the MMO Battle Arena style of game. You got your team of however many players going up against another team of players. One team wins, another loses. A really simple concept that can be fun. But my gosh, internet. The one thing that ruins the fun is other players raging, and even worse, taking out that rage on their teammates. I couldn't even begin to quantify the amount of times that I've been playing one of these games. The match is hardly 5 or 6 minutes in, and there's some player using the chat to just complain or berate other players. Keep in mind that these games on average last much longer than 5 to 6 minutes. Just to give an example, stop me if you've heard this one before. Match is a few minutes in, not much has happened, aside from one of the teammates dying and someone types, "Man, I'm done. This other teammate is pissing me off." Or the much more common, "This player fucking sucks." It's probably the worst thing you can do. For starters, it's not helpful. I mean, not once can I recall a moment where one player raged and harassed at a teammate that was doing poorly, and that teammate responded by saying, non-sarcastically, "Yeah, I fucking suck. Thanks for telling me," and then proceeded to completely improve their performance and just play extremely well. It doesn't happen. More often than not, the other person just tells you to fuck off, and rightfully so. Look, I'm not going to sit here and say there aren't bad players. There are. But telling them that they suck is not constructive for team morale. It doesn't help them improve because it's not like you're giving them pointers to play better. It does nothing positive. You're just being a jerk. And that's not even considering the fact that you're kind of jumping to the conclusion that they're bad based off of just a few minutes. Maybe they had a bad start. Maybe they're experiencing lag. Maybe they're not able to focus because they're distracted by some jackass raging at them on the team chat. I've seen various players get off to a bad start and that turn it around later on in the game. If I had to put it into perspective, just imagine if Vincent van Gogh was 2 minutes into painting the Starry Night, only having a few brushstrokes on the canvas, and some guys showed up and said, "This painting is terrible. You suck. Just give up on becoming a painter." Or even better, imagine if you're in a movie theater that's packed, movie just started only a few minutes ago, and then this one person just loudly started yelling at how terrible the movie was, several times. Even if the movie isn't exactly that good, shut the hell up. Nobody likes that person. Don't be that person. Have some common courtesy and do what everyone else does, and just complain about the film after it's over in the lobby. Because you're just ruining the experience for others. Believe it or not, people don't play games online to hear you complain. They put up with you complaining because they feel the game is worth it and fun. So do us all a favor and stop raging at other people during the game. And try to have fun. That's what gaming is really about. Now, I want to cap off the first installment of this series on a more positive note, with a segment I refer to as, here's a recommendation. If you're the type of person who enjoys a good short story, with a good twist at the end, and have 10 to 15 minutes to spare, I'd recommend the short story After 20 Years by William Sidney Porter, who went by the pen name O. Henry. The story is about two close friends who, in their youth, made an agreement to meet each other 20 years later to see how life turned out for one another. The story serves as a fantastic reminder that people change over time. But not everyone changes for the better. And with that, I've wrapped up the first installment in what will be a regular thing for me every Sunday, at the very least until the end of 2015. Take care for now, folks. Feel free to comment your thoughts on any of the subjects discussed, whether they're positive or negative. I will read them. I've opened Pandora's box, so I might as well roll with it. But
Pandora's box.